Well, this is gonna be great. Hey folks, welcome back to our Dragon Ball FighterZ tutorial series. This video is gonna be a big overview of the 5 fundamentals. You need to learn these 5 fundamentals in order to master Dragon Ball FighterZ. These fundamentals are common to a lot of fighting games, but they're important to keep in mind when you're trying to improve your fighter's game. If you learn to identify which one of these areas you need to work on, which one of these areas is causing you to lose matches, then it's easier to work at it and get a lot better. My name's Globku, and let's get to it. Alright, here are the big 5. Neutral, pressure, punish, defense, and health management. We're gonna talk about each one of them individually, but understand that they're all connected. And sometimes the lines are blurry, the lines that separate each one of these fundamentals, because they're all happening at the same time. Dragon Ball FighterZ is a fast game. On 1 second you're applying the pressure, but you're actually being read like an open book, and you're about to get some royal punishment. So let's start this video by talking about neutral, the most complicated by far of the 5 fundamentals. Neutral is when neither player has the upper hand. This is how every single fight starts. Also, when someone techs out of a Dragon Rush, both players return to neutral. There's no player blocking, there's no player attacking or applying pressure. Both players are equal and they're looking to get into a better position. That better position could be initiating a combo or just getting the opponent to block as they start applying some pressure. The whole neutral game for beginners is pressing the right trigger. Super dash, super dash, super dash, super dash. But they also quickly learn that this move is easily countered. And from here, players start to think a bit more about their neutral game, even if they don't know it's called neutral, even if they're just thinking about it subconsciously. They start to think about, how can I approach my opponent if I just can't super dash all the time? And some characters are good at the distance, throwing a beam attack, vanishing, and starting a combo from there. Others call in their assists to cover their approach. More advanced players will bait the enemy by getting in and out of range with quick dashes, and this is what we call footsies. And all of these elements are viable in neutral. Even the super dash is viable under certain circumstances. It's all about knowing what to do at every single moment, depending on what your opponent... Does your opponent have the hiccups? It's a good time to attack. So movement is extremely important during this phase, and so is reading your opponent. You know your neutral game is good when you consistently gain the upper hand. And again, that doesn't mean catching the opponent in a combo necessarily, it could just be getting them to block, or pushing them closer to a corner. That's good enough to win the neutral phase. What comes after is a different fundamental. Pressure. If you're able to get your opponent blocking, that's when your pressure begins. While your opponent is blocking, he must either read or react to what you're gonna do, and then find an opening in your block string to counter and reverse the roles. Well, if you practice your block string, you can make it really hard for the opponent to react to that stuff. Each character's block string is going to be different, and it's important to have more than one, and this is because of something called mix-up. If you're attacking a player who's blocking and you're just throwing medium or low attacks, he can just block everything you throw at him by blocking low. So you need to mix up your block strings to try and open your opponents up. There are essentially 5 types of mix-up that I can think of right now. You have the up-down mix-up, which is the most basic of them all, where you mix overhead attacks with low attacks, forcing the opponent to block high or low depending on where the attack is coming from. You've got left-right mix-up, where you try to attack the opponent from his back. This is usually done via crossing up to the enemy's back with an instant air dash, but you can also cross under the enemy in some situations. And then there are also, of course, some characters whose abilities just cross up automatically. And this forces the opponent to push the opposite direction while blocking. You've got the Dragon Rush, which is totally unblockable, but the opponent can tech out of it by pressing the light or the medium attack buttons. You can also mix up by delaying your inputs, delaying them just enough to completely disrupt your block string. This allows you to throw an extra low attack, for example, or do 2 instant air dashes in a row, or simply make it look like you're done with your block string and bait the opponent into attacking. And finally, some characters have a command grab, which once again are unblockable, but unlike the Dragon Rush, you cannot tech out of them. You either need to jump or hit the opponent to interrupt them, unless they're Broly. In that case, hitting them, you need to go through the armor. A good pressure or mix-up is one that will open up the opponent, letting you initiate a combo. Your goal could also just be simply pushing them into a corner, at which point you usually lose the left-right mix-up, but the enemy player loses a lot of defensive options. This makes them more vulnerable and gives you the edge. So as you practice block strings in practice mode, keep these types of mix-up in mind and try to come up with different types of strings, because if you always do the same one, you become predictable and the opponent will know exactly what to block and when to punish you. Speaking of punishment, once you open up your opponent or once they make a mistake, it's time to punish them as hard as you can. We've made a video on combos previously, you can click the card to watch it, but basically, your punish game is about how much damage you can deal with what you have. Because combos are not always gonna start the way you want them to. Sure, Sure, you may have been practicing a combo in practice mode that starts with a low-medium attack, but what if you catch your opponent with one of your special moves? Can you convert into a combo from there? It's important to learn to convert from different situations. And the best way to learn this is just to play against other players. Find the situation in a previous match where you couldn't convert a combo. What were you doing? For instance, did you land a dive kick with Goku Black and didn't know what to do from there? Well, hit practice mode and see if you can figure it out. By the way, the answer is usually vanish. When the game came out at low levels, I would often find players that had a better neutral game than me. And I was bad at defending, so I would get opened up all the time. But their punishment was really nothing special. Their combos weren't that big of a deal, which meant in the end, I could make a lot of mistakes and still win the match. Your punish game is meant to deal a lot of damage because at higher levels, your opponent's mistakes are going to be less and less. So you need to take every opening you can get. And hey, it's not always about the damage. Sometimes you could throw a super in the end for extra damage or extend a combo with an assist. But if you're not going to kill a character, sometimes that stuff is not worth it. Sometimes it's better to go for the setup. Finish a combo with a slide knockdown, throwing the opponent into the corner, and then use that assist to apply pressure and open them up again. It's very situational, but usually if my combo is not going to kill a character, I'd rather he slide into that corner instead of throwing a level 1 super for a little extra damage. Of course, if you were always the one applying pressure or dealing damage, Dragon Ball FighterZ would be a very easy game. But the thing is, your opponent is also going to use this advice against you. And if you don't want to get punished, you better have a good defense. FighterZ is a game that prioritizes attacking players. Defensively, your tools are limited, so make sure you're using all that you can. Sure, you can theoretically block forever if you're that good at reading your opponent, but no one's that good. Even Goichi gets opened up from time to time, but that doesn't mean you should not practice blocking against all types of mix-ups. While defending, your goal is to reverse the roles, to initiate a combo when the pressuring opponent gives you an opening, or to get them to block instead of you. Worst case scenario, you can go back to neutral. And you do this utilizing two skills: reading and reacting. You need to have good reflexes to react to your opponent's mix-up, by blocking high when they leave the ground, by changing the direction of your block when they vanish or cross up, and if you're able to read your opponent to know what they're gonna do next, you can counter them and reverse the tides. And this is why it's important to have different block strings. If you only have the one, you become easy to read and therefore easy to counter. Now, despite your tools being limited while defending, there are still a few things you can do. You can reflect by pressing back and the special button. It's important not to spam this because reflect is also punishable. But if there is a micro opening in the block string, you can usually reflect and throw the opponent off balance. More often than not, a good reflect will return you to the neutral position at the very least. You've also got a switch cancel by holding forward and an assist button while blocking. This costs 1 bar of meter and can also be dangerous if done recklessly, because even though you canceled and got a character out, the opponent can still catch the character flying in. So again, you must be able to read your opponent's block string to do this safely. You can also react with a vanish, which is very punishable, but at lower intermediate ranks it works pretty well. You can also do a raw level 3 if you think your opponent is going to keep attacking, but this is even more punishable if the opponent blocks your level 3 super, so you gotta read him very well. Sparking Blast is also a great way to save a character, though that could also be something the opponent is forcing you to do because they don't want you to have a sparking level 3, so that's all part of the game. And then if you're not in the corner, you can also dash away from the opponent when an opening arises, such as after blocking a vanish attack, though some characters can actually follow up after you do a backdash. Now, these basic skills, you might have noticed they are common to a lot of fighting games. The next one, however, is a bit more specific to this subgenre of fighting games, and that's health management. I've played against players who were really good at games like Street Fighter, for instance, but they come to Dragon Ball FighterZ, and even though they're better players than me, I end up winning because I can keep an eye on my health bars and they're not used to it. But nowadays, you still see professional matches where health management is the determining factor behind the victory. Finding a good spot to swap characters safely when you've got a lot of blue health is a skill worth mastering. A raw swap is easily punishable, so players become scared of doing it. But there are many ways of switching characters safely. At the end of a combo that ends in a slide knockdown, when you get to your opponent blocking an attack from your assist character, when the opponent is in the air, because down heavy in the air doesn't really work as an anti-air move like the down heavy on the ground. You can also do a DHC. Even if you lose the corner or you didn't really want to spend a meter, recovering the blue health is something worth doing sometimes, and it could very well win you a match. And health management is not only about managing your own team's health, it's also about managing the enemy team. The enemy swapped characters, you weren't counting on it. They either swapped safely or you just didn't react. That's okay. If you catch them in a combo, instead of going for maximum damage, force a snapback. Force that other character back in. Make that damage permanent. It doesn't really matter if they manage to swap that character out again. At least they're not regenerating health anymore. Of course, that's easier said than done, but hey, I did tell you that all of these fundamentals are connected. If you want to snap back, you gotta be able to open them up using pressure and mix-up. To initiate pressure, you gotta know how to play the neutral game, or if they have the upper hand, you have to know how to turn the tables using your defensive game. Everything is connected. Each of these topics could have multiple videos covering them, from general tips in neutral, what do you do in neutral, to specific setups and mix-up opportunities using very specific teams. There's a huge potential of videos here, so I pass the question off to you. Ooh, yep. What topic would you like me to cover next week? What would you like to get better at in Dragon Ball FighterZ? Let me know in those comments down below. Last time we gave you a Bardock masterclass. You can watch it by clicking the video up here. If you're in the mood for something else, there's also the video at the bottom, but as always, thank you very much for watching. My name's Globku, and I'll see you next time. Boy.